We'll light our chalice in person and encourage those of you online to light one at home. Our opening reading today are words from Reverend Michelle Collins called To Care Without Drowning. Some days, the world's pain floods through us like water through a broken dam. Every headline, every cry of distress becoming our own. We come here thirsty for the wisdom to care without drowning, to love without losing ourselves in the undertow of others' sorrows. Come, let us seek together the steady foundation from which compassion flows. I invite you to join me in singing now our opening hymn, number 1012, When I Am Frightened. It is in the Teal hymnal. We'll also have the words on the screen. Please rise and body your spirit as you're willing and able, and our wonderful spunky choir will lead us in this hymn. For today's time for all ages, I have a little story for us, as I am wont to do. And this is a story of our history, of one of our Unitarian ancestors and the work of compassion that she did in the world. Today, as we talk about compassion, we're not talking just about the kind that shows up when someone is sad or hurt, but the kind that's part of how we move through the world every day. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that compassion is something that we can practice and grow, like the seeds we water in our hearts. So this is a story about someone who lived long ago, over 200 years ago, before cell phones, before cars, or even electricity in most homes. Her name was Dorothea Dix. How many of you have heard that name? All right, we know some of our history. Even though her world looked very different from ours, she had something very important in common with us. Dorothea believed that every person deserves to be treated with dignity, compassion, respect, and care. When she was a child, her life was really hard, and her mom was often sick. Her dad was not kind. Her family moved from place to place a lot. Dorothea didn't always feel safe or seen. Eventually, she went to live with her grandmother in Boston, and things got better. Dorothea loved to read, and even though girls weren't always taught to study back then, Dorothea taught herself all kinds of things. When she grew up, she became a teacher and opened a school for children who were poor. She wasn't trying to be famous. She was just a compassionate person who wanted to help. That's what compassion looks like, noticing someone who is hurting and choosing to care. One day, Dorothea decided to visit the Unitarian Church where Dr. William Ellery Channing was speaking. What she heard that day changed her life forever. She heard Dr. Channing preach that God was love, that we are all part of love, and that we are called to show love to others. This was very different from the sermons she had heard in her own church. And it wasn't long before Dorothea became a Unitarian. Inspired by her UU faith and the call to put love into action, with compassion at the center of her life, she started looking around for people who were being treated unfairly, people who had been forgotten. One day, she visited a prison where women were being locked up, not because they were dangerous, but because they had mental illnesses. Some of them were chained to walls with no warm clothes or blankets. The people in charge said it doesn't matter. They don't feel cold like normal people. But Dorothea knew better. She said they are people. They feel cold. They feel pain. They deserve dignity. And then she did something amazing. She didn't just feel sad, she took action. Dorothea visited every single prison in Massachusetts. She took notes, she asked questions, she wrote reports, she spoke to people in government. And guess what? Because of her work, the state opened hospitals where people with mental illness and need of care were treated kindly and given food and clothing and care and respect. Then she went to other states and did it all over again. She showed up, she spoke out. Dorothea helped change the way our country thinks about mental health. Dorothea believed that people should be treated kindly, even if they act or think differently. Everyone deserves dignity, no matter what they're going through. With her life, she taught people that compassion often means standing up and saying, "That's not right. We can do better." Or even sitting down and saying, "That's not right," if you can't stand. We see so many people being treated unfairly in today's world. Where can each of us in our lives make space for the kind of compassionate action that Dorothea modeled in her life? She shows us what compassion in action looks like and taught us about dignity. Let's reflect on that for a moment with a little bit of music. Please join me in singing "Comfort Me." If you're using the hymnal, we'll skip verse 3. It's 10:02. Otherwise, please remain in your seats and we'll use this as a meditative, reflective song.
Our reading is from the Book of Joy, Lasting Happiness in a Changing World, from the section The 8 Pillars of Joy, Pillar 7, Compassion, something we want to become. Scientists have found that when two mice are together, if one is injured, the other will lick it. The injured mouse that is being licked by another mouse will heal much faster than a mouse that is alone. The Dalai Lama said, "This concern for others is something very precious. We humans have a special brain, but this brain causes a lot of suffering because it is always thinking, me, me, me. The more time you spend thinking about yourself, the more suffering you will experience." The incredible thing is that when we think of alleviating other people's suffering, our own suffering is reduced. This is the true secret to happiness. So this is a very practical thing. In fact, it is common sense. Our modern world is suspicious of compassion because we have accepted the belief that nature is red in tooth and claw, and that we are fundamentally competing against everyone and everything. According to this perspective, in our lives of getting and spending, compassion is at best a luxury, or at worst, a self-defeating folly of the weak. Yet evolutionary science has come to see cooperation and at its core emotions of empathy, compassion, and generosity as fundamental to our species' survival. What the Dalai Lama was describing, explaining that compassion is in our self-interest, evolutionary biologists have called reciprocal altruism. I scratch your back today, and you scratch my back tomorrow. This arrangement was so fundamental to our survival that children as young as 6 months have been shown to have a clear preference for toys that reflect helping rather than hindering. When we help others, we often experience what has been called the helper's high, as endorphins are released in our brain, leading to a euphoric state. The same reward centers of the brain seem to light up when we are doing something compassionate as when we think of chocolate. The warm feeling we get from helping others comes from the release of oxytocin, the same hormone that is released by lactating mothers. This hormone seems to have health benefits, including the reduction of inflammation in the cardiovascular system. Compassion literally makes our hearts healthy and happy. Compassion also seems to be contagious. When we see others being compassionate, we are more likely to be compassionate. This results in a feeling called moral elevation, and that is one of the aspects of joy that Paul Ekman had identified. Recent research by social scientists Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler suggest that this ripple effect can extend out 2 or 3 degrees of separation. In other words, experiments with large numbers of people show that if you are kind and compassionate, your friends' friends, and even your friends' friends are more likely to be compassionate and kind. We fear compassion because we're afraid of experiencing the suffering, the vulnerability, and the helplessness that can come with having an open heart. Psychologist Paul Gilbert found that many people are afraid that if they are compassionate, they will be taken advantage of, that others will become dependent on them, or that they won't be able to handle others' distress. One of the differences between empathy and compassion is that while empathy is simply experiencing another's emotion, compassion is a more empowered state where we want what is best for the other person. As the Dalai Lama has described it, if we see a person who is being crushed by a rock, the goal is not to get under the rock and feel what they are feeling. It is to help to remove the rock.
So compassion is a big topic. We can come at it from so many different angles. but it comes into this difference of living it out. I want to read you Brené Brown's definition of compassion because, as many of you know, she's one of my favorite sources to go to. In Atlas of the Heart, Mapping Meaning, Connection, and the Language of Human Experience, she defines it this way. Compassion is the daily practice of recognizing and accepting our shared humanity so that we treat ourselves and others with loving kindness, and we take action in the face of suffering. Do we hear a theme this morning? I think there is something fundamental in this moment about being part of a Unitarian Universalist faith that holds us in all of the fear and also propels us to be empowered. Right here at Merging Waters, before I came, many years before I came, we went through a process and defined these three big values of authentic curiosity, mindful interdependence, and courageous love. I think all three of these tie in deeply to what it means to cultivate and practice compassion. To have compassion, first, we have to start with authentic curiosity. We have to ask, what is someone else experiencing? Sometimes we even have to ask before that, what are we experiencing? To find compassion for ourselves as well. Then we have to take the next step from there's a person over there experiencing a thing to feeling the connection, the mindful interdependence of recognizing our shared humanity, of knowing that there are essential experiences that are part of being human that connect each and every one of us. There are experiences of living, of life, of being in this universe. That means what happens to one affects all of us. Compassion calls us to recognize that mindful interdependence. And then courageous love is compassion in action. Courageous love doesn't just sit and watch someone hurting. It sits with the pain and says, what can we do? Pema Chodron, in her book, The Places That Scare You, The American Buddhist Nun, she writes, when we practice generating compassion, we can expect to experience fear of pain. Compassion practice is daring. It involves learning to relax and allow ourselves to move gently toward what scares us. In cultivating compassion, we draw from the wholeness of our experience, our suffering, our empathy, as well as our cruelty and our terror. It has to be this way. Compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It is a relationship between equals. Only When we know our own darkness well, can we be present with the darkness of others? Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. So, story time from my own life. When I was in 9th grade, I couldn't figure out what was going on with me. I said, why do I feel different than everyone else? Why do I feel like I can't even lift my head from looking down at the ground? Why do I feel this gnawing pain and anxiety inside of me? And I was lucky to be in a privileged family, to have the resources and to have the communication and loving parents who, when I said, something is wrong, I need help, got me into therapy, got me into the resources that I needed to wrestle with my own inner darkness, my own inner sense of pain and anxiety. I was eventually diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder and a little bit of generalized anxiety. And then 25 years later, eventually ADHD, but that's a whole nother sermon. That explains a lot. But the experience of knowing deep pain and struggling with and facing my own sense of suffering gave me an early insight into what compassion looks like in action. There was nothing anyone could do to fix my pain. You couldn't make something for me. You couldn't fix a problem in my life. What I needed most was someone to be able to hear my darkness, to hear the pain inside me, to sit with me and acknowledge that what I was experiencing was real, to give me the space to work through and figure out where this hurt was coming from. And for me, eventually, medication did help a little bit with turning the tide. But it taught me, facing my own pain, taught me how to sit with other people's pain. So when I was in training to become a minister, I went into a hospital chaplaincy work for a year and sat at many bedsides where there was nothing I could do to fix things. But what I could do is sit with people, hear their story, make space for their pain to be heard. That is the start of compassion. And it is doing something to listen deeply. And sometimes there are things we can fix. Systemic issues of racism and oppression are things we can work on and fix. So it's holding the duality of what compassion looks like and how we live it out. We need both the compassionate action of witnessing one another's emotions without getting lost in the other person's emotion. When I was sitting with people, I wasn't saying, I am going to try to take your pain into me. What I was saying is, I know the same kind of pain. I know that emotion in my own experience, and I can see it mirrored in your experience. So there's holding that, and then also doing the work we saw modeled by Dorothea Dix, and going the next step of how do we change the systems to alleviate the pain and suffering that is from the external world instead of the internal world. And the two weave together over and over in inseparable ways. So I invite you to find where compassion shows up for you, both in being gentle and loving with your own inner suffering and pain, showing authentic curiosity for your own experience, as well as leaning into mindful interdependence of how we all impact one another, and then stepping into or moving into courageous love to make change in the world.